I'm Renee, 32, and Christmas was always my favorite holiday until last year. I spent weeks planning the perfect family gathering, despite working double shifts at the hospital. Mom's words cut deeper than any scalpel. "You're just a burden, always have been." Then my brother Thomas smirked, adding insult to injury. 10 years of supporting them financially, emotionally gone in an instant. That night changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch. Growing up in our modest suburban home in Wisconsin, I always knew my role. As the eldest child, responsibility was thrust upon me early. Our family photo albums tell the story: me at age 10, helping Mom with baby Thomas. At 12, cooking dinner while Mom worked late. At 14, my childhood effectively ending when Dad walked out on us. Dad leaving was like a bomb going off in our lives. One morning, he was there drinking coffee and complaining about work. That evening, his closet was empty, and a brief note lay on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." Those 6 words redefined our family forever. Mom fell apart completely. For weeks, she barely left her bedroom. I stepped up, making sure Thomas got to school, bills were paid on time, and we all ate something resembling proper meals. I grew up fast, learning to forge Mom's signature on school forms and telling bill collectors she was just out at the moment. When Mom finally emerged from her grief, our family dynamic had permanently shifted. I was no longer just her daughter. I had become her support system, confidant, and sometimes even her parent. "What would I do without you, Renee?" became her constant refrain. Those words once made me proud. Later, I'd recognize them as the first links in an emotional chain. Thomas experienced a completely different childhood than mine. 8 years younger, he was just 6 when Dad left. Mom protected him from the harsh realities I faced daily. "He's too young to understand," she would say when I suggested Thomas could help with chores. "He needs to have a childhood. You're stronger, Renee. You understand, right?" And I did understand, or thought I did. I took pride in being the strong one, the responsible one. I believed this was love, sacrificing my needs for my family. This became my identity, the perfect daughter who never complained, never failed, never needed anything for herself. By the time I graduated high school, our roles were set in concrete. I worked 2 jobs to put myself through nursing school while still contributing to household expenses. Meanwhile, Thomas became increasingly entitled. His poor grades were always someone else's fault. His frequent trouble at school was dismissed as boys being boys. When he crashed the car, Mom bought him for his 16th birthday, a luxury I never received. She consoled him while writing a check for repairs she could ill afford. I excelled in nursing school through sheer determination, eventually becoming a nurse practitioner. My career choice wasn't accidental. I'd been taking care of others my entire life. The difference was that at work, my efforts were recognized and valued. Patients thanked me. Colleagues respected me. Each paycheck reflected my worth in a way my family never acknowledged. Despite building my own life and career, I remained tethered to my family's needs. When Thomas needed tuition for the college program he would later abandon, I co-signed the loans. When Mom's car broke down, I made the payments on her new one. I never questioned these sacrifices. They were simply what family did for each other. Or so I believed. The year leading up to last Christmas had been particularly challenging. I'd received a significant promotion at work, becoming the youngest nurse practitioner to lead our hospital's emergency care unit. The role came with more responsibility, longer hours, and higher stress levels. For the first time, I couldn't immediately respond to every family crisis. Thomas had dropped out of his 3rd attempt at college that spring, moving back into Mom's house without discussion or plan. He quickly fell into a routine of sleeping late, playing video games, and working occasional shifts at our cousin's landscaping business, just enough to fund his social life while Mom covered his living expenses. My reduced availability coincided with an increase in family demands. Mom's calls became more frequent, often beginning with, "Since you're too busy for us these days." Thomas needed money to cover a forgotten utility bill. Mom needed help navigating some health insurance paperwork. The familiar guilt tactics escalated. "Family should come first," Mom would say pointedly during our weekly phone calls. "Success doesn't mean much if you forget where you came from." Each conversation left me feeling drained and inadequate, torn between my professional responsibilities and my lifetime role as family caretaker. As Christmas approached, I saw an opportunity to repair the growing rift. I requested time off well in advance, determined to create the perfect family Christmas. I spent evenings after exhausting hospital shifts shopping for thoughtful gifts. A cashmere sweater for Mom in her favorite shade of blue. The expensive wireless headphones Thomas had mentioned wanting. Small but meaningful presents for extended family. I planned a traditional menu, ordered a fresh turkey from the local butcher, and sourced ingredients for Mom's special cranberry relish recipe she hadn't made in years. I invited Aunt Janet, Mom's sister, who had always shown me special kindness, and her daughter Sarah, hoping their presence might diffuse the tension that had been building between us for months. "This Christmas will fix everything," I told my best friend Alicia over coffee. "We just need some quality time together." She gave me a concerned look, but supported my optimism. "Just remember, you can't control how others respond," she cautioned. I dismissed her worry. After all, what could go wrong at Christmas? I arrived at Mom's house on Christmas Eve morning, with my car packed full of gifts, groceries, and decorations. Snow had fallen overnight, coating the neighborhood in picture-perfect white. The familiar two-story house where I'd grown up looked exactly as it had when I was a child, right down to the slightly crooked star on the mailbox that Dad had installed the year before he left. Mom greeted me with a quick hug and immediately began inspecting the grocery bags. "You bought pre-made pie crusts. Homemade tastes better," she commented, setting the tone for the day. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that perfection wasn't possible, connection was my goal. I spent the morning transforming the living room with garlands, lights, and ornaments collected over decades. Each decoration held memories: the salt dough star I'd made in second grade, the glass ball with Thomas's baby footprint, the angel tree topper that had graced our Christmas trees for as long as I could remember. Mom wandered in as I was hanging stockings on the fireplace. "The tree looks nice," she conceded, "though the lights seem a bit uneven on the left side." I adjusted them without comment, swallowing the familiar sting of her partial approval. By afternoon, delicious scents filled the house as I prepared dishes that could be made ahead. The doorbell rang around 4 o'clock, and I opened the door to find Aunt Janet and Cousin Sarah, their arms full of presents and overnight bags. "Renee," Aunt Janet embraced me warmly. "The house smells divine. You've been busy." Her genuine appreciation lifted my spirits. Sarah, now 25 and working as an elementary school teacher, gave me a knowing smile. As the responsible daughters in our respective family branches, we shared an unspoken understanding. Thomas arrived as we were setting the table for Christmas Eve dinner, letting himself in without knocking. He'd clearly started celebrating early, bringing with him the faint smell of beer and cologne. His greeting was casual, as if he hadn't seen me in days rather than months. "Look who decided to join the family," he commented, dropping his single small shopping bag of hastily wrapped presents under the tree. Mom immediately brightened at his arrival, fussing over him like a returning hero, rather than someone who lived 10 minutes away and had contributed nothing to the holiday preparations. Dinner went smoothly enough, with Aunt Janet steering conversation towards safe topics, community news, fond holiday memories, gentle family gossip. I noticed how she skillfully intervened whenever Mom began criticizing my career choices or Thomas started complaining about his latest failed job interview. After dinner, we followed our tradition of opening one gift each. I had carefully selected special Christmas Eve presents, cozy pajamas for everyone to wear that night. Mom received silk ones in her favorite blue Thomas Scott flannel with a sports team logo, and I'd found matching festive patterns for Aunt Janet, Sarah, and myself. "Practical as always, Renee," Thomas commented with a slight eye roll. "Some things never change." The subtle dig didn't escape Aunt Janet, who gave him a sharp look. "Thoughtful as always," she corrected, squeezing my hand. "These are perfect for Christmas morning photos." We stayed up watching holiday movies, Thomas checking his phone constantly and eventually announcing he was meeting friends for drinks. "It's Christmas Eve," Mom protested weakly. "I'll be back before Santa comes," he joked, grabbing his jacket and leaving without helping clean up. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by remnants of my former self, academic trophies, nursing school graduation photos, worn paperbacks, I felt a strange disconnection. The person who had earned those achievements seemed far away from the woman who now felt anxious about facing her own family the next morning. Christmas morning arrived with perfect holiday weather, light snow falling against a bright blue sky. I woke early out of habit and hospital schedules, slipping downstairs to start coffee and breakfast preparations. Aunt Janet joined me soon after, and we worked together in comfortable silence, setting out pastries and fruit alongside steaming mugs of coffee. The gift exchange began around 9, with everyone gathered in the living room. I'd spent considerable time choosing meaningful presents within my budget, wrapping each with care. Mom opened her cashmere sweater with a polite "thank you" before quickly moving on to Thomas's gift to her, a drugstore gift set that still had the clearance sticker partially visible on the bottom. When Thomas opened his expensive headphones from me, he barely looked up from his phone. "Cool, thanks." No recognition of the cost or thought behind them. Minutes later, he was effusively thanking Mom for the new smartwatch she'd given him, a model I knew was well beyond her budget. The disparity continued throughout the morning. My practical gifts, selected with care and consideration, received minimal acknowledgement, while Thomas's last-minute offerings or requests for money to get something later were met with enthusiasm. I caught Aunt Janet watching this pattern unfold, her expression a mixture of concern and recognition. Sarah leaned over during a lull in the festivities. "Your brother sure has the golden child thing working for him," she whispered. "My brother Justin pulls the same routine with my parents." Before I could respond, Thomas announced he was heading out to test drive his new watch with a quick run to meet friends. Mom immediately began making excuses for him. "It's hard for young people to sit around all day with family. He'll be back for dinner." "He's 24, not 14, Sarah commented louder than she perhaps intended. "Renee managed to take time off from saving lives to be here all day." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Mom straightened in her chair. "Thomas has different needs. Renee has always been more self-sufficient." "You mean she's had to be?" Aunt Janet said quietly. I quickly changed the subject, suggesting we start dinner preparations. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of cooking and forced conversation. I focused on creating the perfect meal, as if delicious food could somehow fix the cracks becoming increasingly visible in our family facade. Thomas returned just as we were setting the table, bringing with him 2 unexpected friends who had nowhere else to go. I silently rearranged place settings and stretched the meal to accommodate them, ignoring the knowing glance between Aunt Janet and Sarah. Mom beamed at Thomas's generosity in bringing home strays for Christmas, completely missing the fact that I was the one scrambling to make them welcome. The additional guests, friends from Thomas's latest stint at community college, seemed uncomfortable with the obvious family tension, but grateful for the food. By the time we all sat down for dinner, the emotional temperature in the room was volatile. Too much wine had been consumed. Too many old patterns triggered too many resentments, left festering beneath surface pleasantries. The Christmas table looked like something from a magazine, golden turkey ruby cranberry sauce, candlelight reflecting off grandmother's china. 6 adults seated around a table groaning with food should have been a scene of contentment. Instead, the atmosphere crackled with unspoken tension. "Renee, tell everyone about your promotion," Aunt Janet prompted as we began passing dishes. She's the youngest emergency care director in the hospital's history, she added proudly. I described my new role briefly, conscious of Mom's tightening expression. Before anyone could respond, Thomas interjected. Must be nice having a job where you can just disappear for days and still get paid, he commented, spooning mashed potatoes onto his plate. Some of us have to show up to get a paycheck. Some of us have to show up consistently enough to keep a job, Sarah muttered, earning a warning glance from her mother. My schedule is actually more demanding now, I explained, keeping my tone neutral. I'm responsible for staffing the entire emergency department, which means I'm essentially on call even when I'm not physically there. Which explains why you're too busy for family these days, Mom added, her criticism thinly veiled as concern. Thomas's friend Jake looked increasingly uncomfortable. The food is amazing, he offered, clearly trying to change the subject. I accepted his compliment with a smile and turned the conversation toward neutral territory, asking about everyone's plans for the new year. This proved to be a tactical error. Actually, I have some exciting news, I said when my turn came. I'm planning to buy a house in the spring. I've been saving for years, and with the promotion I finally qualify for the mortgage on a small place near the hospital. The table fell silent. Mom set down her wine glass with deliberate care. A house? You're moving? Her voice held an accusation. When were you planning to tell us? I'm telling you now, I replied, confused by her reaction. It's not far from here, just closer to work. I thought you'd be happy for me. Thomas made a sound between a laugh and a snort. Classic Renee, always having to one-up everyone and show how much better she's doing than the rest of us. That's not at all what I... First the big promotion, now a house, he continued. Meanwhile, abandoning the family that supported you all these years. Supported her, Aunt Janet interjected, eyebrows raised. From what I've seen, it's been quite the opposite. Mom's face flushed dark red. She slammed her palm against the table, causing glasses to rattle. You have no idea what you're talking about, Janet. You've always taken her side. There shouldn't be sides in a family, Sarah said quietly. Mom ignored her, turning to me with years of unexpressed resentment suddenly surfacing. You think you're so perfect with your career and your independence? You've always acted superior to us. The truth is, you're just a burden, always have been. The words hung in the air like smoke. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. 20 years of sacrifices flashed before my eyes, the childhood cut short, the sleepless nights working to pay bills, the dreams deferred to meet family needs. Thomas smirked, sensing an opportunity. Finally, someone said it, he added with obvious satisfaction. You act like you're so perfect, but we're all tired of your martyr complex, always making sure everyone knows how much you sacrifice for the family. Jake and his friend exchanged glances and murmured something about stepping outside for air. Sarah sat, frozen fork suspended midway to her mouth. I've supported this family since I was 14 years old, I said quietly, fighting to keep my voice steady. I've paid your bills, co-signed your loans, been there for every emergency. Nobody asked you to do that, Mom snapped. You chose to interfere to control everything. You're just like your father, always keeping score. The comparison to my absent father stung like a physical slap. I'm nothing like him. He walked away. I stayed. I helped. I cared. Well, maybe we'd all be better off if you'd walked away too, Thomas added. Aunt Janet stood up abruptly. That's enough. You should both be ashamed of yourselves. Mom turned on her. Don't tell me how to talk to my daughter. This is between family. I am family, Janet responded evenly. And I've watched for years as Renee has given everything while receiving nothing but criticism in return. I couldn't stay at the table another moment. My chest felt tight, my eyes burning with unshed tears I refused to let them see. Excuse me, I managed to say, pushing back my chair and walking. not running from the room with as much dignity as I could muster. I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, closed the door quietly, and finally allowed the tears to come. 20 years of trying to be enough, of filling the gaps left by others, of believing that sacrifice equaled love, all of it suddenly revealed as a terrible miscalculation. Through the floor, I could hear the dinner continuing. Moments of uncomfortable silence punctuated by forced conversation. Mom's voice slightly too loud. Thomas laughing at something. Life continuing as if my world hadn't just imploded. I sat on the edge of my bed, surrounded by mementos of a childhood spent being the adult in the room. Academic awards earned while working part-time jobs. Photos of family vacations I'd helped fund. A nursing school graduation picture, where Mom and Thomas had arrived late, missing the ceremony, but appearing in time for the celebratory dinner I'd paid for. For the first time, I allowed myself to see these objects as evidence not of family love, but of a profound imbalance I had accepted as normal. Each item told a story of inequity I had ignored in service of maintaining peace. The bedroom door opened softly and Aunt Janet appeared with a plate of food. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, setting it on the desk. What happened downstairs was unacceptable. I wiped my eyes. Maybe they're right. Maybe I do have a martyr complex. She sat beside me on the bed. "Renee, listen to me. What you have is a profound sense of responsibility that has been exploited for years by people who should have been protecting you." She took my hand. "I should have said something sooner, but your mother and I, well, this pattern didn't start with you." "What do you mean?" Janet sighed deeply. "Your mother was always the favored child in our family. Nothing I did was ever quite good enough while she was praised for minimal effort. When we became adults, I kept trying to earn her approval by helping her, supporting her decisions, being available whenever she called. It took me years of therapy to recognize the dynamic and break free from it." Her words resonated with painful clarity. "So, I'm repeating your pattern with Thomas." "Family patterns have a way of recreating themselves unless someone actively breaks the cycle," she confirmed. "I see in you the same people-pleasing behaviors I struggled with. The difference is, you're recognizing it much younger than I did." From downstairs, I heard Thomas loudly asking Mom if she would help him buy a new car, his current one being unreliable. Through the floor came her immediate agreement, despite her frequent complaints about tight finances. Janet noticed my expression. "You're wondering why she gives so freely to him while resenting your success." It wasn't a question, but I nodded. "Your independence threatens her. Your brother's neediness makes her feel important, necessary. It's not rational, but family dynamics rarely are." I moved to my desk, pulling out an old accordion folder. Inside were years of financial records checks written to Mom for emergencies, loan documents co-signed for Thomas, credit card statements showing purchases made for family needs. The evidence of my financial support was overwhelming when viewed all at once. "I always believed this was what family meant," I said quietly. "Taking care of each other, no matter what." "Family means mutual support," Janet corrected gently. "What you've described is a one-way street." As night fell outside my window, I could hear the Christmas celebration continuing downstairs without me. Mom's laughter drifted up through the floorboards. Thomas's voice animated as he told some story, the clink of dishes being cleared. I picked up my phone and called Alicia. When she answered, I could hear holiday music in the background. "Renee, everything okay with the family Christmas?" "No," I admitted for perhaps the first time ever. "Nothing about this is okay, and I think it hasn't been for a very long time." She listened without interruption as I recounted the dinner disaster, occasionally making sounds of sympathetic outrage. When I finished, she didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions. "What do you need right now?" she asked simply. The question startled me. No one ever asked what I needed, only what I could provide. I realized I didn't know how to answer. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I know I can't keep doing this." My guest room is yours for as long as you want it, she offered immediately. Tonight, tomorrow, next month, whatever you need. Her unconditional support contrasted sharply with what I'd experienced downstairs. It felt like a window opening in a stuffy room, letting in fresh air for the first time in years. Aunt Janet, who had been giving me privacy during the call, returned with a cup of tea. Whatever you're thinking, I support you, she said, handing me the steaming mug. I looked around the room that contained so many memories, both painful and precious. Then I opened my notebook and began making a list. By midnight, my path forward was clear. The house had grown quiet downstairs. Thomas had left to meet friends at a bar, taking his 2 guests with him. Mom had retired to her room after finishing the wine. Only Aunt Janet and Sarah remained in the living room, speaking in hushed voices that stopped when I appeared on the stairs. I had changed out of my Christmas outfit into jeans and a sweater, my overnight bag packed and slung over my shoulder. The Christmas gifts I'd received remained on my bed, except for the delicate bracelet Aunt Janet had given me, now circling my wrist. You're leaving, Sarah observed, not sounding surprised. I nodded. I need some space to think clearly. Alicia has offered her guest room. Aunt Janet stood. I think that's a wise decision. Sometimes distance provides the perspective we need. Will you tell Mom I'll call her tomorrow? I asked, knowing I was taking the coward's way out, but unable to face another confrontation tonight. Of course, Janet replied, then hesitated. Renee, I want you to know I'm proud of you, not just for your professional accomplishments, but for having the courage to recognize when something isn't working. Her words strengthened my resolve. I placed my house key on the coffee table alongside an envelope. What's that? Sarah asked. The January mortgage payment, I explained. I've been making half the payments on this house for 3 years. This is the last one. I've written an explanation inside. Sarah's eyes widened. Does your mom know you've been paying her mortgage? She knows, I confirmed, though she refers to it as helping out occasionally with bills. I moved toward the front door, then paused by the Christmas tree. The ornaments I'd carefully hung that morning now seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. I gently touched the salt dough star I'd made as a child, then continued to the door. I'll call you both tomorrow, I promised. Thank you for being here. It made a difference. The night air was bracingly cold as I walked to my car, snow crunching beneath my boots. Christmas lights twinkled on neighboring houses, their cheerful colors at odds with my inner turmoil. I placed my bag in the trunk, then sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I overreacting? Was I abandoning my family on Christmas night? The familiar guilt began to rise, then subsided as I remembered Mom's words. You're just a burden, always have been. I started the car and pulled away from the curb, watching the house where I'd grown up recede in my rearview mirror. With each block that passed, my breathing became easier, as if physical distance was already providing emotional relief. Alicia was waiting at her door when I arrived, wearing pajamas and offering a mug of hot chocolate. No questions tonight, she promised, unless you want to talk. Not tonight, I replied, accepting the warm mug gratefully. Tonight, I just need to not be there. She nodded understanding and showed me to her guest room already prepared with fresh towels and an extra blanket. Take all the time you need, she said before leaving me to settle in. Alone in the unfamiliar room, I experienced a strange mixture of emotions, grief for the family relationship I'd thought I had relief at escaping the tension fear of what came next. And underneath it all, a surprising sense of possibility. For the first time in my adult life, I was putting my own needs first. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning brought a flood of texts and missed calls. Mom alternated between angry demands to know where I was and wounded questions about how I could ruin Christmas. Thomas sent a single message. Drama queen much. I responded to neither, needing time to process before engaging. Instead, I called my bank and canceled the automatic transfers to Mom's account that had been in place for years. I contacted the utility companies where I had co-signed for Thomas, removing myself from future responsibility while ensuring current bills were paid. These practical steps felt empowering, concrete actions, reclaiming resources I had freely given without recognition. Alicia, true to her word, asked no questions but provided quiet companionship as I worked through my financial disentanglement. Over lunch, I finally shared the full extent of my family's financial dependence on me. "I knew it was bad," she commented, "but I had no idea it was this systematic." She examined a spreadsheet I'd created documenting years of financial support. "Renee, this is tens of thousands of dollars." "I never kept track before," I admitted. It felt wrong somehow, like I was keeping score. "It's not keeping score to recognize when a relationship is unbalanced," she pointed out. "It's self-preservation." The week between Christmas and New Year's became a period of intense reflection. I declined invitations to family gatherings instead, using my remaining vacation days to view apartments closer to the hospital and meet with a financial advisor to discuss my home buying prospects now that I would no longer be supporting multiple households. Mom's messages grew increasingly manipulative. "I think I'm coming down with something," she texted on day 3. When I didn't immediately respond, the symptoms escalated until by evening she was considering going to the ER. I recognized the pattern from countless previous guilt trips, but still found myself tempted to rush to her side. Instead, I called Aunt Janet, who lived closer. "I'll check on her," she promised. An hour later, she reported back, "She's watching TV with a glass of wine. No visible health crisis." This confirmation of what I'd suspected, that Mom's emergencies were tactics to regain control, strengthened my resolve to maintain boundaries. I finally responded with a brief message. "I'm taking some time for myself. I'll be in touch when I'm ready to talk." Thomas attempted a different approach, sending mutual friends to plead his case. "He's really worried about you," my high school friend Danielle reported after an accidental run-in at the grocery store. "He says you left Christmas in some kind of emotional state." "Did he happen to mention calling me a burden with a martyr complex?" I asked calmly. Her surprised expression confirmed my suspicion that Thomas was rewriting history, casting himself as the concerned brother, rather than a primary cause of my departure. By New Year's Eve, I had signed a month-to-month lease on an apartment 5 minutes from the hospital, arranged for furniture delivery, and begun the process of separating my life from my family's in earnest. These practical steps proved therapeutic, each one a declaration of independence. Alicia and I spent a quiet evening welcoming the new year, sharing takeout Chinese food and making vision boards for the months ahead. Mine featured images of the small house I hoped to buy, professional goals at the hospital, and words like boundaries, self-care, and authentic relationships. I never realized how much energy I was spending managing my family's needs and emotions. I told her as midnight approached. "It feels like I've been carrying a heavy backpack for years and only now noticed how much it weighs." January brought a return to work and a new routine centered around my needs rather than others' expectations. I scheduled my first ever therapy appointment, found a support group for adult children of emotionally immature parents, and began exploring interests I'd never had time for previously: a cooking class, a hiking group, volunteer work that used my medical skills in the community. The family pressure continued unabated. Mom's tactics cycled predictably through guilt, anger, and occasional attempts at reconciliation that always included phrases like, "Whatever I did to upset you," rather than genuine acknowledgement of her words or behavior. Valentine's Day brought the most significant test of my new boundaries. Mom appeared at the hospital during my shift, tearfully apologizing in the very public space of the emergency room lobby. "I miss you so much," she cried, drawing the attention of colleagues and patients alike. Can't we just put this behind us? The old Renee would have done anything to end this scene, quickly agreeing to whatever would restore peace. The new Renee gently led her to a private consultation room and spoke with calm clarity. "I'm happy to rebuild our relationship," I told her, "but it needs to be different from before. I need acknowledgement of the hurtful things that were said, and I need respect for my boundaries going forward." "Why can't you just forgive and forget?" she countered. "That's what family does." "Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened," I explained. "It means creating a healthier relationship moving forward, which requires changes on both sides." She left unsatisfied, but I remained firm. This conversation set the pattern for the months that followed. My consistent boundaries met with varying levels of acceptance and resistance from family members. Thomas was the most openly hostile to my changes, especially when he realized that financial support was no longer forthcoming. "You've always thought you were better than us," he accused during a tense phone call in March. "Now you're punishing us for not worshiping your success." "I'm not punishing anyone," I replied evenly. "I'm creating healthy boundaries for myself. You're an adult, Thomas. It's time for both of us to stand on our own feet." Throughout spring, I maintained limited contact while focusing on my own growth. The distance allowed me to see family patterns with increasing clarity: how Mom triangulated between Thomas and me, how Thomas manipulated through charm or crisis depending on his needs, how I had been cast as both provider and scapegoat simultaneously. Therapy helped immensely, giving me tools to recognize emotional manipulation and permission to prioritize my own well-being. My therapist introduced me to concepts like emotional incest and parentification that helped explain the uncomfortable role I'd occupied since childhood. "You were asked to be the emotional spouse for your mother and surrogate parent to your brother," she explained. "Those weren't appropriate roles for a child, and they're not appropriate now." By early summer, I had enough savings for a down payment on a small townhouse near the hospital. The closing date fell almost exactly 6 months after the Christmas confrontation. As I signed the mortgage documents, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. This milestone reached, not despite my family, but because I had finally prioritized my own needs. Aunt Janet and Sarah helped me move in, turning the day into a celebration, complete with takeout pizza and a bottle of champagne. "To new beginnings," Janet toasted, raising her glass in the half-furnished living room. "And to chosen family," I added, including Alicia and 2 close colleagues who had supported me throughout the transition. The months that followed brought gradual healing and redefined relationships. Mom eventually recognized that my boundaries weren't negotiable and began making efforts to respect them. Our conversations became less frequent but more genuine, focused on current events rather than past grievances or financial needs. Thomas struggled more with the new normal, alternating between angry accusations and awkward attempts at connection without financial subtext. In a surprising development, the removal of my safety net appeared to motivate genuine change. By fall, he had secured stable employment and moved into his own apartment, his first independent living situation since college. As the year progressed, I discovered parts of myself long submerged beneath family obligations: a love for landscape photography, enjoyment of solo travel. Even a tentative romance with a doctor from the cardiology department who demonstrated refreshing respect for personal boundaries. When the holiday season approached again, I made conscious decisions about how to engage with family traditions. I accepted an invitation to Thanksgiving dinner at Mom's, bringing a clearly defined contribution rather than handling the entire meal as in previous years. The gathering was imperfect, but notably less toxic than before. For Christmas, I chose to host a small celebration in my new home on Christmas Eve, inviting Aunt Janet, Sarah, and a few close friends along with Mom and Thomas, who would need to accept my hospitality on my terms. Christmas Day would be spent volunteering at the hospital, followed by dinner with my new boyfriend and his family. Mom initially resisted this departure from tradition, but eventually accepted the invitation. Thomas agreed to come without bringing unexpected guests, a small but significant acknowledgement of boundaries. 6 days before Christmas, almost exactly 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, I stood in my kitchen preparing appetizers for a holiday party at work. The radio played Christmas music, and for the first time in months, I found myself singing along without tension or dread. My phone chimed with a text from Mom. "Looking forward to Christmas Eve at your new place. Can I bring anything?" No guilt, no manipulation, just a simple question. I smiled as I typed my response. "Just yourself. I've got everything covered." And for the first time in my life, I truly did. The process of rebuilding my life after that fateful Christmas wasn't quick or easy, but the results transformed everything. 6 months after moving out, I purchased my first home, a cozy townhouse with a garden patio perfect for morning coffee. The day I received my keys felt like graduating into a new phase of adulthood, one defined by my choices rather than family expectations. During those first months of separation, Mom cycled through predictable phases of guilt-tripping anger and manipulation. "I'm all alone here," she would text, "after everything I've done for you." I maintained my boundaries with gentle firmness, offering relationship but refusing to resume financial support or emotional caretaking. Thomas's reaction surprised me most. Without my safety net, he finally faced real consequences for his choices. After losing his third job in 6 months and receiving no bailout, he reluctantly accepted a warehouse position his friend recommended. To everyone's surprise, including his own, he excelled at the structured environment and clear expectations. Within 6 months, he'd been promoted to shift supervisor. "I never thought I'd say this," he admitted during a cautious coffee meeting in July. "But maybe you were right about the whole enabling thing. I kind of needed to hit bottom." Our relationship remained tentative, building slowly on fragile trust. He attended a family therapy session with me in August, where we began unpacking the sibling dynamics created by our mother's favoritism. The conversation was painful but necessary, opening pathways to a more balanced adult relationship. My contact with Mom evolved into a structured routine. Sunday afternoon phone calls, occasional dinners out, rather than emotional marathons in her home. I learned to recognize the signs of boundary testing, the sudden emergencies that could wait until morning, the subtle digs at my independence, the attempts to involve me in Thomas's problems. With practice, I responded to these tactics with calm detachment rather than anxious compliance. "I notice you're trying to involve me in Thomas's financial situation," I would observe when she brought up his car troubles. "He and I have agreed to handle our finances separately." The first few times, she reacted with defensive anger. Gradually, she came to respect, if not fully understand, this new paradigm. Therapy became my anchor during this transition. My therapist helped me recognize how deeply I'd internalized the role of family caretaker and how challenging it would be to form new patterns. "You're not just changing behaviors," she explained. "You're rewiring neural pathways formed since childhood. Be patient with yourself." This perspective helped when I experienced inevitable setbacks, the time I lent Mom money for a medical emergency that turned out to be a hair appointment, the weekend I dropped everything to help Thomas move only to discover he hadn't packed a single box. Each mistake became a learning opportunity rather than evidence of failure. By fall, I had developed a rich life outside family obligations. I joined a hiking group that explored local trails each weekend. I volunteered at a medical clinic serving uninsured patients, finding deep satisfaction in using my skills without the emotional complications of family care. I made friends who knew me as Renee, the nurse practitioner, photography enthusiast, and amateur baker, not Renee, the family fixer. Perhaps most significantly, I began dating David, a cardiologist, who demonstrated what healthy attachment looked like. He respected my boundaries without taking offense, expressed his needs clearly, without manipulation, and showed genuine interest in my growth. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect rather than codependency. The approach of the holiday season brought inevitable anxiety. Would family expectations threaten my hard-won independence? Would old patterns reassert themselves amid sentimental traditions? I decided to reclaim Christmas on my own terms, hosting a small gathering in my new home while setting clear expectations. "I'm having Christmas Eve dinner at my place," I told Mom during our Sunday call in early December. "I'd love for you and Thomas to join Aunt Janet, Sarah, and a few friends. I'll handle the main course if everyone brings a side dish or dessert." Her momentary silence spoke volumes. This wasn't the Renee who would exhaust herself creating a perfect family Christmas while receiving only criticism in return. This was a Renee who participated as an equal, offering genuine connection without martyrdom. "That sounds nice," she finally replied. "I'll bring my cranberry relish." The evening itself wasn't perfect. Mom made several comments about my tiny dining room, and Thomas arrived 40 minutes late, but it represented enormous progress. We exchanged modest, thoughtful gifts. Conversation flowed without major conflict. When difficult moments arose, I navigated them with new skills rather than falling into old patterns. Christmas Day brought another departure from tradition. Instead of spending the entire day managing family dynamics, I worked a morning shift at the hospital, bringing holiday cheer to patients unable to go home. That evening, I joined David and his family for dinner, experiencing what a healthy family gathering could feel like: differences acknowledged with respect, boundaries maintained with love, support offered without scorekeeping. As the new year began, I reflected on everything that had changed since that painful Christmas confrontation. The journey hadn't been linear. There had been painful setbacks, difficult conversations, moments of doubt. Yet the overall trajectory moved steadily toward health, toward authenticity, toward a life that reflected my values rather than my conditioning. I no longer measured my worth by others' approval or my usefulness to family members. I recognized manipulation without feeling obligated to respond. I offered support when appropriate without depleting myself in the process. Most importantly, I understood that love doesn't require sacrifice of self. True love creates space for all parties to grow and thrive. The family patterns established over decades haven't disappeared completely. Mom still occasionally tests boundaries, Thomas sometimes slips into entitlement, and I still feel the pull of old caretaking impulses. The difference is that we now recognize these patterns and have tools to choose different responses. My townhouse has become a sanctuary filled with objects that reflect my emerging identity. Photographs I've taken during solo hikes, books that expand my understanding of family dynamics, gifts from friends who love me for myself rather than what I can provide. This physical space represents the internal boundaries I've established, welcoming to others, but fundamentally mine. The most profound lesson I've learned is that families can change, but only when all members participate in the process. My boundaries didn't destroy my family as I'd feared. Instead, they created the possibility for healthier connections. By refusing to play my assigned role, I gave others the opportunity to develop beyond theirs as well. This Christmas, 1 year after words that felt like the end actually became the beginning, I finally understand what self-worth truly means. It's not found in others' validation or sacrificial service. It's built through honoring your own needs, establishing healthy boundaries, and creating relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. If you're watching this and recognizing your own family patterns in my story, please know that change is possible. It isn't easy and it isn't quick. But with courage and support, you can rewrite the rules of engagement and create the life you deserve. You are not responsible for others' happiness at the expense of your own. You are worthy of relationships that nourish rather than deplete you. I'd love to hear your stories of setting boundaries or creating positive change in challenging family dynamics. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ultimately led to personal growth? Drop a comment below, subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that prioritizing their well-being isn't selfish, it's essential. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to break unhealthy patterns and create space for something better to grow.